Welcome back to Rewilded Wellness, where we are rewriting health stories and reconnecting to our body's innate wisdom. I'm Lydia Joy, and after 13 years in clinical practice with over a decade focusing on hair tissue mineral analysis, I've witnessed something profound. Okay? Our deepest healing doesn't come from chasing quick fixes, but from genuine integration. And today I want to dive into a distinction that has transformed my approach to healing, the difference between what I'm going to say as correction and then integration. And this isn't just philosophical, it's really the foundation of becoming your own health authority and creating sustainable, I'd like to take it further and say regenerative wellness. The truth is, we have all been conditioned to view our bodies through a lens of correction, especially when it comes to our health, right? We see symptoms, we see them as problems to fix, we see imbalances as defects to correct, and healing as a linear path from, broken, if you will, to fixed, or high cortisol to balanced cortisol, or whatever marker is wrong in your body, right? And I say wrong, I say that with slight tongue in cheek because that's how we're viewing labs. That's how we're viewing symptoms, right? And so this correction mindset really just has us constantly searching for the perfect supplement, the ideal protocol, the magical diet that will fix what's wrong. And I get it. I've been there myself, and I've walked through this conversation with probably over 1,000 people. And that's where I started. That's how I got started on my journey. Like, all right, let me try a diet. Let me try a supplement. Let me try all the things, right? But what if our symptoms, hear me out, aren't actually problems to fix primarily, right? What if they're messengers and they carry information about what our system, our whole self, truly needs? What if, from an HTMA perspective, what if our mineral imbalances aren't just these random malfunctions or all these malfunctions, but intelligent adaptations to our unique life circumstances? This is where integration offers a completely different perspective, a completely different approach, one that honors the wisdom of your body while creating the conditions for profound transformation. You guys have heard me talk a lot about Arthur Haynes' book, A New Path, that I went through back in 2022. And he really captured this concept beautifully in his book when he showed how deep nutrition isn't just about correcting deficiencies, but about reconnecting with our deepest nature. Everything affects everything. Our physical symptoms reflect our emotional landscape, our mineral patterns mirror our life experiences. And to me, this understanding also speaks to the Chiron energy in all of us, the wounded healer archetype that represents our capacity to transform our deepest wounds into our greatest medicine. So when we approach our health challenges through integration rather than mere correction, we're turning our symptoms into teachers and our struggles into strengths. So today I want to explore why integration, not just correction or like the fixing mindset, right? To me is the heart of rewilded wellness and a more sustainable path to healing, a more regenerative path to healing, right? I want to look at this, how it applies specifically to, let's call it mineral balancing, right? Ultimately, the work that I'm doing is supporting humans to on their path, but I use a tool called hair tissue mineral analysis and an approach called mineral balancing. So anyways, that's the lens that I want to use today, okay? Because many of you have found me through this body of work. Now, if you're not familiar, bear with me. There's still so much here for you to take away. You could just simply replace an HTMA or mineral balancing with, traditional lab work or holistic health where you did a whole bunch of labs, right? Where, simply fixing the imbalances seen on a hair test or on a different lab, um, really often fails to create lasting change, right? So, what we want to do is approach the health journey from a more comprehensive perspective. So, whether you're dealing with, chronic health issues, maybe it's some deep fatigue or some hormonal imbalance or autoimmune challenges or simply a desire for greater vitality, understanding this distinction will fundamentally change how you navigate your healing path. This is about becoming your own health authority. Now, we're not rejecting support or guidance, right? That's not we can have becoming a health authority and getting support aren't separate from each other. They can both coexist. But by reconnecting with your body's innate wisdom and working with it rather than against it, that is our goal, right? So I want to have this conversation about the critical distinction between integration and correction and how it applies to every aspect of your healing journey. So, when we approach health through the lens of correction, we're operating from what I call the fixing mindset. Fix me, fix me. I'm broken. Um, this perspective sees the body as a collection of problems to solve, imbalances to correct, and symptoms to eliminate. And it's the approach that has you Googling, like, what supplement fixes high calcium, or how do I raise my potassium levels fast? Guilty. How many times have I spent hours trying to fix my hair test back in the day? Now the correction mindset is linear and often mechanical. It asks, well, what's broken? How do I fix it? How can I quickly get back to normal? In this come from or framework, symptoms are the enemy. They're unwelcome intruders to be eliminated as quickly as possible. The timeline expectations we have are usually hurry up, short. Progress is often measured by how quickly we can make the symptoms disappear. Now, let me be clear. There is nothing inherently wrong with wanting relief. Pain is real. Discomfort is real. The desire to feel better is completely valid. But what happens when we approach our healing exclusively through this correction lens? We often find ourselves caught in cycles. Symptoms improve temporarily, then return. New imbalances emerge as we fix others, or we become increasingly sensitive to the very interventions meant to help us. And this is where integration offers a profoundly different approach. It begins with the understanding that your body isn't broken, it's adapted. It sees symptoms not as random malfunctions, but as intelligent responses to the conditions your system has faced. Rather than a fixing mindset, integration operates from what I call a relationship mindset. It asks different questions. What is this symptom communicating? How has this adaptation served me? What conditions would allow my system to release this pattern? So, with this framework, the symptoms aren't the enemy. They're messengers carrying important information about what your system needs. And then timeline expectations, they tend to honor the nonlinear nature of healing, recognizing that sustainable transformation often follows a spiral path rather than a straight line. Integration also acknowledges that every pattern in your body, whether we're looking at an HTMA and it's like high tissue calcium, really low potassium, a low ratio, a high ratio, elevated copper, these all initially developed as intelligent adaptations to your unique circumstances. Now, before these patterns can change, their wisdom and purpose must be recognized. Okay, this is very practical because when we can honor the intelligence behind our adaptations, we create the psychological and physiological space necessary for transformation. We move from fighting against our bodies to collaborating with them. This is key. This is everything. This is something I have come to realize in my own journey. Right? It's establishing this relational space that's healthy that you have with your own body, with your own health journey, with all the things that are going on. Okay. And the difference between these approaches becomes most evident when we hit roadblocks in healing, because we will. And in the correction mindset, resistance is seen as failure or evidence that we need a stronger intervention. In the integration mindset, resistance is recognized as information. It's a signal. Maybe we need to build more safety. Maybe we need to provide different resources. Maybe we need to adjust our pace. You see, integration honors both where you've been and where you're going. Correction only acknowledges where you should be. Okay, so this distinction, it's not also about rejecting all the conventional approaches, supplements, protocols, yada, yada. It's really about the context in which we use them, whether we're deploying them as commands or offering them as support for a system that is finding its way back to homeostasis, balance. That is what your body is always trying to do, and you can be its best ally, your own best ally in this, process, right? Now, I believe that minerals can act as messengers, right? So when we understand this difference that I'm trying to relay here between correction and integration, we can then explore how it applies specifically to mineral patterns and why I'm saying I see minerals as messengers rather than just metrics to manage. Now, when most people first encounter hair tissue mineral analysis, they are drawn to the concrete data it provides. Finally, objective numbers that seem to explain their symptoms, right? Like high tissue calcium might explain their deep fatigue. Low tissue potassium could be a reason behind the heart palpitations they're having. Elevated copper could be something that's makes sense as to why they're having so much anxiety, right? There's truth there. These mineral imbalances do create real physiological effects. But what's often missed is the deeper story that these patterns are telling. Your mineral patterns are not random fluctuations or simply the result of dietary choices. Please, let's get that into our heads. Like, I eat well, I eat so good. Why is my mineral imbalance so weird? Guys, it's so much more. They are sophisticated adaptations. Your body's got a strategic response to the very unique and diverse circumstances of your life. So they reflect not just what you've eaten and consumed, but what has consumed you. All right, let's take calcium, for example. When I see dramatically elevated calcium levels, okay, normal's 42, okay? When I say dramatically elevated, we're talking 150 plus. I've seen them high as 600. That's insane, right? But there's more behind the story, right? Now, there is a term that we use called a calcium shell. Okay, and that's what this is. This hair tissue calcium level elevated. It's a shell. It's a protective mechanism, right? So I'm not just looking at that as like oh man, we got to lower that number, right? We got to bring that calcium down. What I'm seeing is evidence of someone's body attempting to create protection around really vulnerable aspects of their experience, right? Calcium elevation often emerges during periods of overwhelming stress, significant grief, or when boundaries have been repeatedly violated. So the body raises calcium as a buffer. So it's literally creating a physiological shell to reduce sensitivity to overwhelming stimuli. It's a brilliant adaptation when the nervous system lacks the resources to process intense experiences, whether that's physical, mental, emotional, psychological, the whole gamut. Now, similarly, when sodium and potassium are chronically depleted, which I see all the time, we're not just seeing electrolyte imbalances, right? We're witnessing how your body has redistributed vital resources away from non essential functions to maintain core survival. These patterns often appear in people who've spent years, and it's not always knowingly, overriding their needs, pushing through exhaustion, or navigating chronic stress without adequate support, right? Like, I'm a single mom. I've been doing this for 10 years. Uh, I'm in a pattern of challenge around the support that I have, right? I've had a lot of chronic stress, a lot of challenges. So to see my pattern shift dramatically was difficult because I was in it. Do you see? So it's all about your gains and your drains, right? You hear me say this all the time. Um, if you're in a draining lifestyle for whatever reason, um, your body is going to match that in your biochemistry, right? So anyways, the oxidation rate that we can see in a hair test, this is a metabolic type. This is showing us how you're burning fuel for energy, how efficiently your glands are working, your adrenals, your thyroid. And there's a couple different ways we can look at this: fast, slow, somewhere in between, right? Like a mixed. It's not just like this metabolic categorization, right? Like, it's showing how your body has adapted its energy production in response to perceived threats or resources in your environment, resources coming in to nourish you, to support you. Okay. Now, these patterns can persist despite supplementation when they're approached only as problems to fix, because they're not mistakes, they're adaptations serving important protective functions. Your body won't release these patterns until it recognizes it has the resources and safety to function differently. This is why someone can take, calcium lowering supplements for months with minimal change in their levels, or potassium supplements that barely budge their potassium readings, which that's not even the way we do that, by the way. Just let's stop looking at this linearly, right? The body is maintaining these patterns because at some level, it still perceives a need for this adaptation. Okay, I can't tell you how many times people DM me on Instagram. They're like, I can't raise my sodium or potassium. It's always low. I'm trying. Let's hit the pause button and let's take a bigger look at what's going on in the whole of your life, my friends. So think about it this way. If high calcium developed as a protection against overwhelmingly emotional experiences or life experiences, simply trying to force calcium levels down without addressing the underlying need for protection will create resistance. Your body's wisdom will override your intervention because the protective pattern still serves a purpose. I've seen this happen so many times. People can't get out of that calcium shell because they're not, looking at this piece. They're not getting to a place of safety. They're not getting a place of awareness around what's going on in their life. Now, this doesn't mean we ignore the physical implications of these imbalances or that we don't use targeted nutritional support. We absolutely do. But we need to approach supplementation as support for integration rather than as commands for correction, aka force. You guys have heard me say we need to take the force out of everything. Society is like, go, 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 bigger, better, faster, more, drive, go, hard, do all this stuff, build, big, blah. We have to hit the pause button on forcing our lives to happen the way that we think we're supposed to make them happen. We have to do this. It is so crucial in these times. So, when we recognize that minerals are messengers as these reflections of our body's adaptive intelligence, we can work with these patterns rather than against them. We can provide resources that make protective patterns unnecessary rather than trying to dismantle protections that still might feel essential. So, this perspective transforms how we approach healing. Instead of asking, how do I fix this calcium elevation? We start asking, well, what is this calcium elevation protecting? And how can I create enough safety that this protection becomes unnecessary? Instead of demanding that potassium levels rise through supplementation alone, we explore, well, what's behind this potassium being drained or being used up so quickly or not being able to restore, okay? And then we address those underlying patterns while providing supportive nutrients. This doesn't happen in 3 months, my friends. I'm so sorry to tell you that. Spoiler alert. I mean, sure, you can make progress in 3 months, 6 months, but your patterns have been with you for a very long time. And your mineral terrain isn't just telling you what supplements to take. It's revealing how your body has adapted to your life circumstances and what it needs to adapt differently. So when we listen to these messengers with curiosity rather than judgment or freaking out or fear, right? Like, oh my God, we all do it. There's no judgment. I'm just saying this is what we tend to do, right? So if we can hit the pause button on that and shift, they can guide us towards much deeper, truer healing rather than that whole quick fix mentality, that temporary correction, right? Okay, this is important, so bear with me because I'm really going into this today. So, the deep divers are going to stay with me, I'm sure, because this is the deep work we need to be doing in these times, right? We're all hearing about the nervous system, right? So the nervous system connection is so important because our mineral patterns are directly related to that piece. Okay, so the minerals are the messengers. The nervous system is reading and sending these messages throughout your body, right? It's constantly scanning your environment, internal, external, for signs of safety or threat. And this is an ongoing assessment, and it directly influences your mineral terrain. It's creating a bidirectional relationship that's central to understanding integration. When your nervous system perceives threat, whether from physical danger, emotional stress, relational conflict, or even negative self-talk, it orchestrates a cascade of physiological changes. These changes include shifts in mineral utilization and distribution that prepare your body to respond to the perceived threat. Now, in states of chronic stress or trauma response, your nervous system essentially says, we need to prioritize immediate survival over long-term thriving. So this prioritization manifests in your mineral patterns. Certain minerals become depleted as they're utilized for stress responses, while others may accumulate as the body creates protective barriers. This is why safety is an absolute prerequisite for meaningful change in your health. When your nervous system remains in a threat response, it will continually recreate the mineral patterns that support that state, regardless of the supplements you take or the protocols you follow. Think about it in terms of what neuroscience calls adaptive capacity, your system's ability to respond flexibly to changing circumstances. When adaptive capacity is limited by chronic stress or unresolved trauma, your mineral patterns become more rigid. Your body essentially says, we can't risk change right now. We need to maintain these patterns to ensure survival. This explains why pushing harder often creates resistance in the healing process. When we aggressively try to correct mineral imbalances without addressing the nervous system's need for safety, we can actually trigger more pronounced defensive responses. Your body may become more committed to maintaining the protective patterns when it perceives them being forcibly dismantled. Those sentences that I just shared with you are incredibly important because I have seen this countless times in practice. People come into me, they followed intensive protocols to fix their mineral imbalances, only to find their symptoms intensifying. They might have some progress, but it slips back, or they might have some progress, but then the symptoms that intensify are worse than the little bit of progress they made, right? Or new symptoms are emerging, right? So from an integration perspective, this isn't actually failure. It's information. It's the nervous system saying, this pace doesn't feel safe. I need more support before I can release these adaptations. Integration honors the pace of the nervous system regulation, right? So it's going to recognize that sustainable change happens not when we override our body's protective mechanisms, but when we create enough safety that these mechanisms can gradually relax. And this is why approaches that combine mineral support with this whole nervous system regulation work that everyone's talking about these days, right? Like whether it's breath work, mindful movement, whatever it is, nature connection, working on your emotional health, right? It's going to create more profound shifts than mineral supplementation alone. When you are looking at all these pieces in concert, you're working together with them. This is why this is a piece of the work that I do. This is what I teach in my client program. Like, we've got to cover all these bases. And so the beauty of this understanding is that it works both ways, okay? As we support the mineral balance, right, we're simultaneously creating physiological conditions that support nervous system regulation. I really don't love that term, but the nervous system will learn how to calm down and self-regulate, right? There's so much more to say about that. But as your nervous system finds greater ability to regulate in a way that's not extreme, it becomes more willing to shift mineral patterns, right? This virtuous cycle is the essence of integration. So when we provide targeted mineral support within this context, it serves a different function than in the correction model, right? Rather than commanding change, supplementation provides resources that expand your system's adaptive capacity, its ability to respond flexibly rather than reactively. This is why we need to respond, not react. We need to figure out when we're reacting, guys. We need to be recognizing this in ourselves. And then hit the pause button. We all can do this because we have neuroplasticity. We can retrain ourselves. Anyways, this is why the timing, the dosage, the sequencing of supplements matters so much. When approached from an integration perspective, we're not just trying to force levels up or down. We're providing resources at a pace your nervous system can integrate without triggering defensive responses. I've had some circumstances and situations with people where I basically had to tell them to just stop doing everything. Just stop. I want you to go lay in the sun. I want you to go do all these nourishing things. And then when you feel ready, you can pick things back up, right? Because man, oh man, we live in a time where we have all tried to force so much to happen. Now, when we honor this nervous system connection, we're moving from fighting against our body's intelligence to collaborating with it, right? We're recognizing that lasting transformation can emerge not from overriding our adaptive patterns, but from creating conditions where new adaptations become possible. This is the deeper work. This is the beauty, my friends. And this perspective completely transforms how we approach healing. It shifts our focus from battling symptoms to building capacity, creating a foundation of safety and resource from which true healing can emerge. All right, let's talk about the role of supplements here, because I think this is where many of us get caught in cycles of hope and disappointment. Right? We've been conditioned to believe that for every health challenge, there's a supplement solution. Low in magnesium, take magnesium. High calcium, take something to lower it. This is a transactional approach, and it feels logical, but it drastically oversimplifies how our bodies actually function. Don't get me wrong, supplements can be powerful tools in our healing journey. I use them extensively in my practice. But their role in sustainable healing is more limited and more nuanced than we often recognize. When we approach supplements solely as corrective agents, things that will fix our imbalances, we miss their true potential as supportive resources within a larger integration process. Here's what I've observed after years of working with mineral balancing. Supplements alone rarely create lasting transformation. Even the most targeted, high-quality supplemental protocol will typically create only temporary change if it's not part of a broader integration approach. Why? Because supplements don't command change. They support it. They provide resources that make change possible, but they don't override the body's fundamental patterns and priorities. Think about it this way. If your body has created a specific mineral pattern as an adaptation to stress, trauma, or environmental factors, simply adding or removing minerals through supplementation doesn't address the underlying reasons for that adaptation. It's like turning up the heat in a room without addressing the broken window letting in cold air. This explains why the quote, right supplement approach often leads to disappointing results. You might take potassium to raise low levels only to find your body quickly excretes it because the underlying pattern depleting it remains unaddressed. You might take something to lower elevated calcium only to see minimal change because your system perceives a need for the protection that calcium elevation provides. You might follow a copper balancing protocol that works initially but then plateaus because the emotional or hormonal patterns connected to copper haven't been integrated. This isn't because the supplements are ineffective or because your body is particularly resistant. It's because supplements work within the context of your body's adaptive patterns, not independent of them. Timing, dosage, sequencing become critical in this understanding. Rather than using supplements to force the rapid change, we got to use them strategically to provide resources that gradually expand your system's capacity for integration. Okay, so a lot of times my clients, people come to me, they're being told to take this supplement, that supplement. They don't understand why. And a lot of times people stop taking things because it doesn't make sense to them yet. Okay, sometimes we need to start with some stability in our life, supporting our nervous system, supporting our deep nourishment before addressing like major mineral imbalances. Sometimes it means we need to use lower doses than some of the, standard recommendations like the lab puts out, right? just to allow your system to adjust gradually. There's nothing wrong with doing that. In fact, I highly recommend it for most people. Most people cannot tolerate these crazy, like, big protocols. In fact, so many women write to me, "Oh my gosh, the lab wants me to take 23 supplements." They're so overwhelmed by that. It freaks them out. And I get it, right? So this is why we sometimes need to address other things first and go really slow and know that you still can make progress. Like, don't let those big protocols make it mean, oh my God, I have to do that. I have to be able to be capable of that in order to make progress. I have to be able to do that, deep dive, or I'm not going to get anywhere. No, 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 no. We have to address our lifestyle. We have to feel really calm in our bodies about what it is we are doing. Okay. So when we look at supplementation with integration, right, we're going to ask different questions like, well, why am I in this mineral pattern? Like, what's creating conditions for this pattern that I'm in? What resources would support my system in feeling safe enough to shift? What pace of change can my nervous system integrate without triggering defensive responses? How can supplements support rather than override my body's inherent wisdom? This perspective doesn't diminish the value of targeted nutritional support. If anything, it enhances it by placing supplements in their proper context, right? They're tools. They support you. They support integration rather than they're some solution that commands correction. Do you see the difference there? So when we approach supplementation this way, we often find that we need fewer supplements at lower doses to create sustainable change. We become more attuned to how our body responds, adjusting our approach based on feedback rather than just like pushing forward through the resistance to do the protocol. This is the difference between using supplements as commands versus using them as a conversation, right? A dialogue with your body rather than a directive. And to me, the beauty of this approach is that it honors both the science of biochemistry and the art of listening to your body's wisdom, which many of us are out of touch with, my friends. It recognizes that sustainable healing emerges from collaboration rather than control. Think about relationships. Like, can you force someone to love you? Can you force someone to be something you need them to be? No, no, no. Okay, so now that we understand the theory behind integration versus correction, let's get practical. Like, what does an integration approach to healing actually look like in daily life? Like, how do we translate these concepts into tangible practices that support sustainable transformation, right? Okay, so the way that I look at it is involves 5 key elements that work together to create the conditions for profound healing. These aren't sequential steps, but they're just interconnected practices that support each other, right? So first, I do such a long deep dive session with my clients because I want to ask every question possible so that we build awareness of how they've can't come into this adaptive pattern that they're in when we meet together, right? So this goes beyond simply looking at the lab and identifying mineral balances to understanding the context in which they developed in that human, in you. It involves asking questions like, why did these symptoms first appear? What was happening in my life during that time? What stressors, transitions, challenges coincided with these changes? This awareness is not about self-blame. It's about self-understanding. It's recognizing that your body's patterns, however uncomfortable they've become, originally developed for important reasons. They were adaptive responses to your unique circumstances. I like to go through like a pattern mapping kind of exercise, if you will. Like slowly going to be identifying connections between life experiences and physical symptoms, right? This awareness alone can be transformative, shifting your relationship with your body from adversary to ally. Now, the next piece would be creating relationship with symptoms. Rather than viewing them as problems to eliminate, we approach them with curiosity. What might this symptom be communicating? What need or boundary is it expressing? What wisdom might it contain? This doesn't mean passively accepting discomfort. It means engaging with it differently, listening before acting, understanding before intervening, right? What you can do is practice a simple dialogue with your symptoms and just ask, hey, like pain, what are you trying to tell me? What do you need? Right? This relationship stance creates space for your body's intelligence to guide the healing process rather than imposing solutions from the outside. The third element would be providing resources before asking for change. This is where targeted nutritional support, lifestyle adjustments, and emotional resources come into play, not as corrections, but as offerings that expand your system's capacity. When we provide the right resources, whether that's specific minerals, amino acids, nervous system support, emotional practices, we're creating conditions where your body feels safe enough to release protective patterns. This is fundamentally different from trying to force change through intensive protocols. I approach supplementation as resource building rather than just pattern breaking. We start with foundational support. I've talked about this. I don't know if it's ad nauseum yet, but I've talked about it a lot. Repetition is the mother of all learning. So this is the core of the work we all need to be doing. Going back to the foundations to rebuild them. We got to look at where is your nervous system at? What patterns have you created in your life and your nervous system's responding to, right? Like what's going on with your digestion after that, right? Like if your nervous system's swung over here, your digestion has changed and needs to be addressed. Basic electrolytes, basic things, right? Like the foundational stuff before addressing more deep specific imbalances. We want to create a base of safety. That's where the deeper healing can emerge, right? Now, fourth, we have to honor the intelligence of resistance, okay? When healing plateaus or symptoms intensify, the correction mindset sees this as failure or backsliding. The integration approach recognizes it as valuable information about what needs support. Resistance isn't your body being stubborn. It's your body communicating. Maybe the pace is too fast. Maybe there's an underlying pattern that needs addressing first. Maybe the approach needs adjusting to better meet your unique needs. Right? I want to make sure that we all are approaching resistance with curiosity rather than frustration. So, what could a plateau be protecting for you? What resource might be missing that's making change feel unsafe for you? This leads to the fifth element, recognizing healing as a non-linear process. The correction mindset expects a straight line from imbalance to balance. The integration approach honors the spiral nature of healing, how we often revisit similar themes at deeper levels as we build capacity. Progress in the integration model isn't measured just by changing numbers on the test, but by increased resilience, greater self-awareness, improved adaptability, and a deeper connection with your body's wisdom. So, what's remarkable about this approach is that it creates change at multiple levels simultaneously. So, as mineral patterns shift, emotional patterns often transform as well. As the nervous system finds greater regulation, physical symptoms frequently resolve without direct intervention. This is because integration addresses root causes rather than just managing symptoms. It recognizes that our physical, emotional, and energetic systems are inextricably connected and that sustainable healing honors all these dimensions. The integration process isn't about rejecting conventional approaches, guys, or scientific understanding. It's about contextualizing them within a more comprehensive framework that honors your body's inherent wisdom alongside objective measures. This process takes time. It requires patience, self compassion, and a willingness to engage with your healing journey differently. But the transformation it creates is both profound and sustainable. It's a healing that becomes part of who you are rather than something you constantly have to maintain. So, as I bring this exploration of integration versus correction to a close, I want to focus on the fundamental mindset shifts that make this approach possible. Because integration isn't just about what we do, it's about how we perceive ourselves, our bodies, and the healing process. These shifts might seem subtle, but they're very transformative. They change not just how we approach our health, but how we experience our relationship with our bodies. The first shift is from asking, "What's wrong with me?" to, "Hey, body, how have you been trying to protect me?" This simple reframing changes everything. Instead of seeing your symptoms or mineral imbalances as failures or defects, you recognize them as adaptive responses, ways your body has tried to maintain function despite challenging circumstances. This isn't about denying that something needs to change. It's about approaching that change from a place of appreciation rather than criticism. When we acknowledge how our symptoms or imbalances have served protective functions, we create space for new adaptations to emerge. Try this. The next time you feel frustrated by a persistent symptom or imbalance, pause and ask, how might this have been serving me? What might it have been protecting me from? This question alone can shift your relationship with your healing journey. The second mindset shift is from how quickly can I fix this to what pace allows integration. Whew. Please, y'all, please sit with that one. The correction mindset is very impatient. Ask me how I know. It wants results now, regardless of whether now is the right timing for your unique system. The integration mindset honors timing as an essential element of healing. This shift invites us to trust that our healing unfolds in its own perfect timing, not because we're forcing it, but because we're creating the conditions that make it possible. Sometimes the fastest path to sustainable healing involves slowing down enough to allow true integration. Ask yourself, what pace feels sustainable for my system right now? What rhythm of change allows me to integrate new patterns without overwhelming my capacity? The third shift is from which supplement fixes this pattern to what resources does my system need? This broadens our perspective beyond isolated interventions to a more comprehensive understanding of resource. Resources include not just nutrients, but also rest, relationships, emotional support, connection with nature, creative expression, and spiritual practices. When we approach healing through this resource lens, we recognize that sustainable transformation requires nourishment at multiple levels. Sometimes the resource your system most needs isn't a mineral or an herb, but just permission to rest, permission to express emotion, permission to receive support. Consider beyond supplements what resources might support my system in finding greater balance. What forms of nourishment have I been overlooking? The fourth mindset to shift is from why am I still stuck to what might my body still be protecting? When healing plateaus, the correction mindset assumes something's wrong. The protocol isn't working. Your body's being stubborn. The integration mindset recognizes that plateaus often reflect protective wisdom that needs to be honored before change can continue, right? So this shift transforms frustration into curiosity. Instead of pushing harder against resistance, we inquire, excuse me, into what that resistance might be protecting. Often, when we address this underlying protection need, healing resumes naturally. So, you can reflect on if this plateau represents my body's intelligence rather than its failure, what might it be trying to protect or preserve? What would need to feel safe before my system could release this pattern? And you might not know the answer right away, and that's okay. So, these mindset shifts aren't just philosophical. They create tangible changes in how we experience our healing journey. They transform the healing process from a battle against our bodies to a collaboration with them. And this is perhaps the most profound gift of the integration approach. It restores our relationship with our own embodied wisdom. It reminds us that our bodies aren't machines to be fixed, but intelligent living systems with which we can partner. And when we approach healing through the integration rather than correction lens, we discover that the journey itself, not just the destination, offers profound gifts. We develop a deeper connection with our bodies, greater trust in our innate wisdom, and increased capacity to navigate life's challenges with resilience and grace. This is the healing that transcends symptom management to become true transformation, a journey that changes not just how we feel, but who we are. So, I want to thank you guys for staying tuned here today. We've covered a lot of ground, from understanding the fundamental difference between these approaches to exploring how minerals serve as messengers, how the nervous system coordinates our healing response, and the mindset shifts that make integration possible. Right? So the essence of what I've discussed today is true healing isn't about fighting against your body, but collaborating with it, right? It's not about forcing change, but creating conditions where transformation becomes possible. And it's not about correcting what's wrong, but integrating what your body has been trying to protect. Okay? We're not abandoning practical interventions or evidence-based support. We're just contextualizing them within a framework that honors your body's innate wisdom alongside objective measures of health. So I invite you to consider what might shift if you approach your health challenges through this lens that I've expressed today, right? How might your relationship with your body change if you recognized its adaptations as intelligent responses rather than random malfunctions? Okay, so if the concepts I've explored today resonate with you and you're ready to dive deeper into this approach, I'd like to tell you briefly about my Rewilded Wellness Program. This program is designed for anyone struggling with chronic health issues like fatigue, gut problems, brain fog, poor sleep, mood disturbances, whatever it may be. And you're ready to move beyond symptom management to address those deeper root causes of the terrain that you are in, right? Like, it's for anyone that's seeking truly holistic healing that honors the interconnection of body, mind, and spirit. Okay, so through the Rewilded Wellness Program, I use functional nutrition, nature-based mind-body integration to reconnect you with your body's ecology, right? So we're going to combine the science of mineral balancing, the science of, looking at the microbiome, looking at genetic SNPs, with the art of assessing where is your nervous system now, right? So we can create that sustainable transformation, right? So it's not a quick fix. It's not a one size fits all. It's deeply personalized, addressing your unique needs to help you build your capacity to become your own health authority. So if you're ready to approach your health differently, to work with your body rather than against it, I invite you to learn more about this program on my website. Okay. You can read all about it there. You can book a discovery call to explore whether it's the right fit for you. Right. So I really believe sustainable regenerative healing emerges not from battling symptoms, but from creating relationship with them. so we can understand their purpose and provide the resources that make these patterns that we found ourselves in for so long, aka chronic illness, unnecessary. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you um, took something away from this episode. I do invite you to approach your body with loving curiosity rather than criticism. I need this message just as much as all of you do. So, it's all about, honoring the body, creating space for new possibilities, trusting that wisdom over the limitations of mere correction. All right, guys. Well, until next time, stay wild and stay well.